All right, example 8 says find all the values of x in the interval from 0 included to 2 pi not included that solve cosine cubed of x over sine of x equals cotangent of x. All right, so it kind of gave us some clues here to things to watch for as you go through these type of problems, okay? So always think about your domain. Do I have anything in this problem that would cause a restriction in my domain? What? Huh? No, not the interval. I have a fraction, right? And what do we know about a fraction? Your denominator can't equal 0. So for my domain, we know that denominator, which is sine of x, cannot equal 0, correct? So when we get down towards getting our answer, we've got to make sure we don't have sine of x equals 0. If so, it won't work. All right, so we need to simplify this so that we can solve it. So remember, if nothing else, take everything to sine and cosines, right? So we have, what's that, cosine cubed over sine equals cotangent. What is cotangent in terms of sine and cosine? Yeah, cosine over sine. And we're going to need to be able to solve this, okay? So let's get rid of our fractions. How? Yeah, you could cross multiply or just multiply by the denominator, especially since they're the same denominator. So if I multiply by sine of x, or I could cross multiply and then I'll divide by it because I'll see they're the same, okay? We'll end up, our sine of x is canceled, don't they? And so we end up with cosine cubed of x equals cosine of x. Well, how do we solve an equation when we have two different forms of the same variable? Like, what if this had been x cubed equals x? We would need to factor. In order to factor, it has to be set equal to 0. All right, so let's get this set equal to 0. So let's subtract one of them over to the other side. So we got cosine cubed of x minus cosine of x equals 0. So I'm just rewriting that up here. So how can I factor that? What's our first step to factoring? Greatest common factor. So do I have a greatest common factor in these two terms? More than just x. Cosine of x, right? So let's take out a cosine of x. I see a squared and a 1 together. So, yeah, I'm thinking Pythagorean identity. So let's come over here and let's find our Pythagorean identity that has cosine squared in it. Cosine squared plus sine squared equals 1, right? Guys, don't just think you know what the answer is. Double check it because we might make a little mistake, like a sign error, S-I-G-N error. All right, so let's see. I want cosine squared minus 1. So I need cosine and 1 on the same side, and I want the cosine squared to be positive. It's already positive, so let's move the 1. So cosine squared of x minus 1, but I still have that plus sine squared of x. So move it over, so subtract it. So we have cosine squared of x minus 1 equals negative sine squared of x. So check, make sure it's exactly the same. Cosine squared of x minus 1, cosine squared of x minus 1. It's identical, right? So what is cosine squared of x minus 1 equal to? Negative sine squared of x. Alright, I've got them simplified. So now we got two things being multiplied. So let's set them equal to 0 and solve. And this started step 5. Trying to stay up with our steps a little bit. Alright, so cosine of x equals 0. And 1 minus sine squared of x equals 0. Oops. Sorry, it's not 1 minus, it's just negative. Let me take out the 1. Hold on. Alright, cosine of x equals 0. I've got the trig function equals 0. We're going to come back to it. Negative sine squared of x equals 0. I need to solve. So divide by the negative 1. And how do I get rid of the square? Square root it. So we get sine of x equals plus or minus, what's the square root of 0? 0. So plus or minus 0 is still just 0, right? Is that okay? What's wrong with this? Yeah, the domain told us that sine cannot equal 0, didn't it? So that means this one can't be our solution. So we're going to take it out. It's restricted in the domain. So whatever answers we would get from that won't actually work. Alright, so we still have to deal with this cosine of x equals 0 though. So this is where we're going to use our unit circle. So what is cosine in terms of x, y, and r? It's our x on our unit circle, but because we're solving and they put our angle was x here, I'm going to go ahead and just write x over r, okay? So I'm looking for where x over r is going to be 0. So on my unit circle, where is that x value equal to 0 at? Well, let's see. It's equal to 0 on the y-axis, correct? So that would be here, which, what is that angle? Pi over 2. And it's also down here, what is that angle? 3 pi over 2. And are those angles between 0 and 2 pi? Yes, they are. Okay, they're on our first circle. Okay. So there are my two solutions.